So I'm making a video for YouTube. I had a hair restoration procedure done. I'm 8 months post-operation. I think actually almost 9 months post-operation. And I used to be like pretty bald. So I'm just doing a video kind of documenting the process and the kind of after results.
How big a deal was the surgery?
It was like 2.5 days. Like the first 2 days were,
It's hair by hair?
2 different procedures that the doctor did. It's an FUT and an FUE procedure. One is the hair by hair, and the other one's called like the strip method. What was that, sorry? Thank you. She's a great doctor.
Help me connect or disconnect the Trump campaign.
So before I answer any of these questions, I just want to be clear up front that obviously I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, I'm not a medical expert. So I'm not really going to be making recommendations as opposed to just sharing what I did and what worked best for me. So before you do anything, make sure you consult your doctor, your physician, or a medical expert before making any decisions, considering any procedures, or taking any medicine or drugs. So with that out of the way, let's answer a few questions. So some of your Twitter handles are pretty inventive or creative or foreign, so I may not be able to pronounce them, so I'm just going to do my best. First question is, the Adwarda one something asks, is it hereditary in any way? And the answer is yes.
I knew I was going to be bald.
Your father's bald.
Baldness is inherited from the mother's side, Jerry.
But your mother's bald too.
If you're here and you're watching this because either your husband or your boyfriend or you know why you're bald, and chances are, if you think back to high school biology and your Punnett squares, your mom's father is also probably bald as well. So this question from Matt Kylie Oaks, who asks, what was the turning point for you where you decided you officially wanted to do it? So I actually started going bald when I was on a mormon mission. I was about 20, almost 21, and I started noticing thinning in the recession here, but I didn't do anything about it right away. I got back from my mission, and it wasn't until like 5 years later that I started to get on Rogaine and Propecia pretty regularly. And that really helped me. But it wasn't until I was around 25 or so. So that's when I decided to take non-invasive measures. So this question comes from @Miss Rachel May, and she asks, was anyone rude about the loss of it? And I wanted to be clear up front that I welcome baldness. When I'm 50, I'll totally welcome baldness. I'll shave it, I'll do whatever. I'm fine with that. I just didn't want to feel old while still being young. And so I figured now's the time, if any time, to actually do something about it before it's too late. The next question comes from @Han_Mac, and he or she asks, advice for a 29-year-old guy who is balding. How did you get it to come back? ? My first measures were a serious regimen of Rogaine and Propecia. And to be honest, I really saw awesome results with that. After like 6 months or so, I started noticing a lot of thickness, regrowth, and was super happy with those results. The girl who cut my hair, even after a few months, started asking me, she's like, what are you doing? I've noticed that your hair is a lot thicker. The comparison from when I wasn't on it to when I was on it was a huge difference. So first and foremost, the non-invasive measures really did help. And like I said before, while I won't necessarily recommend it, just talk to your doctor first. For me, it was a huge help, but I totally noticed a difference. To the point where, when I wasn't on it, if I was to run my hands through my hair and go like this, I would pull out like 40 or 50 hairs every time. And then I was on it, and I would do this, and it was just nothing. My hair was just stronger and thicker and more robust, and it just felt healthier altogether. So while that may not have brought it back altogether, that was definitely a great start for me. Especially at that age, because there are kind of time frames where you want to get in on it, because there is a point of no return. If you're just completely bald with nothing and just the sides, it's going to be a lot more challenging, non-invasive or invasive, to get that hair back. So if you're still young and you still have hair, that's the time to get going on those measures, whether they're invasive or non-invasive. So this question should really get down to the meat and potatoes of this video. @Miss Talivakaola, sorry about that. She asks, no questions, just eager to know what and how you did it. Really, my husband is dying to know. I get you, husband. So I did undergo hair restoration surgery. You might call it plugs, you might call it a hair transplant, but that's what I did. And obviously that's when I saw the most progress, is when I had that procedure. I actually had this surgery in October of 2015. It took me a while to pull the trigger, but after some research and looking into doctors, looking into prices, looking into locations, I just went for it. So let's get into more detail about the actual procedure: when, how, where, how much, that sort of a thing, which is the next question by @nabpim, who asks, how, where, how much, how long was the process and recovery? Also, how long did it take for you to see results? So like I said before, I was kind of hesitant to do this, and one of the reasons why is because I didn't know what doctor to trust, because there's so many doctors out there. I looked for doctors in New York City, and the price was just astronomical. So I kind of ruled that one out. And then after talking back and forth with like my brothers who were also going bald, and some of their friends, we had like a bald thread going on. So after talking for a while, we discovered my brother had a friend who was considering the surgery, and his brother-in-law, I think, actually went to the doctor I went to, Dr. Keene, in Arizona. Once I found that out, and I found out that he was actually really happy with his results, that to me was a huge testimonial that I could trust, because it's actually word of mouth from someone who had the surgery. I didn't have to rely on a before and after picture online, because I really didn't know how valid that was. So finding out that he actually had the surgery for me was a huge boost in confidence that I can do this and have the same results, because his hair looked great. And so that was the first step that I took to actually pursuing the procedure with a doctor and going down that path and starting to ask those same questions that you're asking now. So now to who and where of that question. Like I said, that was Dr. Keene in Arizona. The procedure actually took place at her office in Tucson. And obviously, because I'm in New York City, I wasn't able to just fly out there for a consultation, fly back, and then fly there again for the procedure. So we did our entire consultation over the phone and through pictures. She sent over a sheet and a form for me with detailed instructions on how to take pictures to show her the severity of baldness. And as you can see, I was pretty bald. It's a pretty stark contrast from where I was like 9 months ago. So we had a few conversations over the phone and talked, and I finally just decided to go with it. So what I did was I booked a ticket. I went out there for I think 3 or 4 days total. But to be honest, the procedure was a little, well, it's hard to actually recall what the procedure was like, because I feel like I was out of it the entire time. I had these plans of driving myself from the office to the hotel and back every night, but I was pretty out of it. The procedure itself actually took 2.5 days. I had a full day of surgery on Monday, a full day of surgery on Tuesday, and then just a couple hours to finish up some of the final grafts on Wednesday morning. So after the assessment with the doctor, she kind of gathered that I was going to need about 3,400 grafts, which is a lot of grafts. It's not the most you can do in a surgery, but it's certainly not the least. I've actually referred a few friends who have gone to her and only have like 1,200 or 1,400 grafts, but I needed about 3,400 grafts, which is a lot of hair and a lot of surgery. So to give you an idea of how she decided if I was a good candidate, or how she decided which procedure to actually pursue, was based on how bald I was, and compared that to how much hair I had, because what she has to do as a doctor in determining how much hair she can pull from the back of my head to put up here is take the density of my hair, and with that determine how much hair she can take back here without thinning out the rest of my head. Because you can't just like take all this hair back here, now I've just got another balding problem, which is back here. So she determined that she was able to take only so much from back here using both the FUE and FUT procedure. So the FUE procedure is essentially just one graft at a time. And the other option is an FUT procedure, which is a little more invasive, but it yields a higher number of hairs. And what that is, they call it the strip method. That is to just kind of like sod, where you just pull out a big strip of flesh from the back of your head, and they just lay that down, and the techs just pull out the grafts one by one. So that yields a much larger number of grafts, but it's a little more invasive. So what she decided to do was, because I needed 3,400 grafts, was to do a combination of the two. So she did the FUE for about half the amount of grafts, if I remember right, and then FUT for the rest, which means I do have an incision mark back here, but to my surprise, and I was totally stressed out about it, to my surprise, it's healed very, very nicely and very well. It's pretty inconspicuous. You can't really notice it. But so that's how she determined the procedure for me, and that combination of FUT and FUE. So I showed up in the morning, I did the paperwork, I did kind of a physical, I did some other things, she kind of prepped me for what was about to happen, and then I essentially just picked 4 or 5 movies per day on DVD and laid down in the chair. And I was really happy with how she went about the whole thing, and asked me questions and my input on where I wanted my hairline to be, One thing that she was very clear from the beginning, and I want to make sure everyone else is clear too, is that she isn't a wizard. She's not a magician, but she's kind of an artist. She told me to have proper expectations and not to expect to be Brad Pitt or does Brad Pitt have a full head of hair? But honestly, my expectations were totally exceeded. So she made sure I managed my expectations, but they were exceeded. So I was really excited about that. But anyhow, she really involved me a lot. She asked me where I wanted to have my hairline, and she made her recommendation and said that she obviously didn't want to go too low. If I go too low, that's more hair that I can't allocate back here. And if I want to have full coverage all the way around, I might have to sacrifice a little bit of the hairline and keep it still kind of high. But if you look at those pictures from before as compared to now, I mean, my hairline before went way back to here. So my hairline now is totally different, but I'm really pleased with the results. So the next part of that question was about recovery. So like I said, it was pretty invasive. Every night I had to take an Uber home to the hotel because I was out of it. I was on either Valium or something. I can't even remember. I remember choosing DVDs, but I don't remember watching them because I was out of it. And so the whole two and a half days was kind of a blur. And that's when the recovery started. I didn't really experience a lot of pain from the FUE procedure, but the incision itself was a little tender and sensitive for the next few weeks. It took a while to fully heal. It had this weird sensation to it where if I was to lean up against a wall, like a hard surface, I could kind of feel it back there. Now I can't feel it, with my hand. I don't notice that it's there, nor feel any pain at all, and you can't see that it's there. But after the procedure, I did experience some pain. So the next part of that question is, how long did it take before you saw results? Okay, this is where I totally freaked out. She even told me from the very beginning, she was totally clear. She's like, listen, you're probably not going to see results for 8 to 12 months. And the crazy thing is when I got home, I had hair. I had these new implants, and I could see them. I could see this new hairline, as you can see in this picture now. It's freaky because I'm like super swollen. But as you can see, I had this hairline. And she told me that I was going to lose that hair because what happens is when the follicle is plucked, the hair dies because it loses blood supply, but the follicle, once it's implanted back in, remains. And so the hair will fall out, but then it's going to grow back. And it just takes a lot longer for it to grow back normally. So when I got home, I saw all this hair on my head, and I was like, this is sweet. And weeks later, I just lost it. Like, it all fell out. And I'm totally panicking, thinking I just wasted so much money, I wasted time, it didn't work. I'm on all the forums. I was searching, I was asking all the questions, and everyone's just like, relax, give it time. It's going to take a while. So I kind of settled down. I was like, okay, we just got to see where this is going to go. And I actually didn't start to see results for about a few months. But then once I saw the results, they just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And actually, I started seeing really great results at about 6 months. I think 6 months was the first time I emailed her, and I was like, hey, listen, sorry for all the panicked emails, but things are great. This is looking awesome. And then before you know it, like a few months later, I have like a full head of hair. And so it did take a while, so you kind of have to be patient. If you're going to consider this route, just know your doctor is definitely going to tell you in advance, hey, this is going to take a while, but you're probably going to have a moment where you're like, hey, this is sweet. I have got hair immediately. It's going to fall out. Don't get too excited. But it'll grow back. It's going to take a while. Just be patient. So the next question comes from @CrackerJackGirl, and she asks, how many treatments did it take? So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that it's kind of like an ongoing process. If you're bald or balding and you're trying to fight it, you probably know when you're trying to hold on to every hair you've got, you really learn how to treat your hair gently. So it's kind of like a lifelong thing where you're trying to keep this hair that you've got. If you're going the non-invasive route using Propecia or Rogaine, that's something that you can do for a really long time, obviously under a doctor's supervision and recommendation. As far as these kinds of treatments, the invasive treatments, it was just one treatment, but it was one surgery over 2.5 days. But that does bring me to the next question, which was asked by @SheKellen. She asked, will aging affect the new hair? Is it just a one-time you're set or touch-ups in the future? So that's kind of a tricky question. It's also a question I asked my doctor as well to make sure, because I didn't want to just be getting into something that I was going to have to continue to redo and redo and redo for the rest of my life. And how she explained it to me was the hair back here that's being transplanted up to here doesn't have the same genetic makeup as the hair that is affected by the male pattern baldness gene. So the hair that you're bringing from here to right here will stay and will remain and grow and not thin. But that doesn't mean that the hair that you have here that's underneath isn't going to continue to thin. And so the best way to combat that is just doing those things I said before. One of the first questions she asked me when we had our assessment on the phone was, are you on Rogaine? Are you on Propecia? If not, have you talked to a doctor? Can you take those things? Are you okay with taking those things? If you experience the side effects? She said, if you're good to go there and you have no problems with taking those medicines, make sure you're on them and just continue to stay on them. That's kind of what I did. And one of the reasons why I started going bald after I started taking the medicine is because before we got married, I just got lazy and I just stopped taking it. And for about a year, I stopped doing the Rogaine, I stopped doing the Propecia, and before you knew it, I was just losing all the hair. I could do this again, and 40 hairs were coming out. And so she said, get back on it. She said, we have a couple months before the surgery, make sure you're doing it, make sure you're on it, so that we can just recruit all the hair that you have there already. We're going to be bringing up all this new hair, but you want to really recruit the hair that you've got there to keep that and to maintain that. But with that in mind, kind of like with other surgeries as well, later on down the line, it is possible that you might need another surgery as kind of a touch-up. But like I said, I do welcome baldness, even though it may not seem like it. I just think in the right time. So if I'm 50 and I'm requiring surgeries, I'm just probably not going to go down that route. I'll probably just say, hey, I'm an old man, it's time to be bald. So that's how I feel about it. So this question came from @KepsCollection, I think, who asks, do you not wear hats as often? Painful? How long did it take? Which I've covered. Are you happy that you did it? Need the details. So about the hats, I wore hats a lot because I was bald. So this question comes from @Alexandra Leonard. So I covered it a little bit, but I wanted to go over it again. The question is, how long was recovery? What did your recovery look like? And that's the part I want to focus on. So when I walked out of surgery, my face was super swollen. I looked like I had just gotten out of a fight. The problem was I was getting on a plane, I couldn't wear a hood, I couldn't wear a hat, and they send you out with this like surgical cap. So I get onto this plane with a surgical cap and a puffy face, and I get home and Amber's like, oh my gosh, what happened to your surgery? But that's just how it was. That's how I reacted. Not everyone reacts that way, but I got really swollen for a couple of days. And that's how I looked. And if you look at that picture again, you can see that I actually had hair. I think a day or two post-op where I've got hair, and you can see it, and it looks kind of gnarly because what's healing there are just a bunch of scabs. So beforehand, you have to ask yourself, okay, do I have enough time to take off? Or am I just okay showing people this? Or do I have the type of job that allows me maybe to wear a hat or a doctor's hat or something where if you are embarrassed, you can kind of cover it up? Because one thing that at least my doctor told me is that post-op, to let the hair heal, I couldn't even wash my hair for at least 2 weeks. And so the recovery can look kind of jarring. So it's just something to keep in mind if you're considering the procedure. But like I said, it's just one of those things you just kind of have to deal with if you want to have that transformation. So this next question is a great question. It comes from @Sarah Barkley, and that is, what were the scariest or worst sounding risks involved with it? I wasn't really worried about things going wrong with the procedure. I just was mainly worried about it just not taking and not working and just like wasting my time, getting maybe a scar back here, wasting money, all for naught. But I just kind of had to be patient. The doctor had to remind me after me annoying her in emails. The next question is also from Sarah Barkley, and that is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how painful was it and would you do it again? So pain aside, absolutely I would do it again. It was a really great decision for me, but I would 100% do it again. Pain during the procedure was pretty slim to none. I was pretty heavily sedated, and even though I wasn't out, I think I did fall asleep a couple of times, but I really couldn't feel much. All I could really feel was kind of tugging as the hair would come out, but I didn't really feel, I think I felt the shots most, but I didn't really feel any pain. After that, I remember my pain meds wore off. That started to kick in where I definitely needed some medicine that was prescribed to me, obviously, which helped a ton. But that wore off after a couple of days. It wasn't really bad. But like I said, for a couple of weeks after that, my incision was a little tender. It wasn't that it hurt. It just like I felt it kind of stretching in order to close that gap. But now I don't feel anything. And after a while, it was just that kind of a dull feeling when I would lean up against something. So this question comes again from Crackerjack Girl, and she asks, are there any special requirements for hair to qualify for the procedure? I don't know if it's a special requirement, but I remember my doctor being up front at the very beginning saying she's going to be honest if it's just not for me. And this goes back to what I was saying before, where I think you can be too bald, where you would require too many grafts and you just don't have the donor area to do that. And so if you need 4,500 grafts, but you just don't have to do that, it just doesn't make sense. because if the density of your hair in the back doesn't allow you to actually donate that hair to the top, because that would run the risk of thinning the back, then the doctor told me, she's like, I'm just going to let you know we can't do that. That was the comfort level that we had, where she said about 3,400 grafts is kind of my number. I'm not sure if there are any other special requirements. Obviously, like I said before, consult your doctor, talk to him. He might have some more recommendations. So the next question says, what does Amber think of your fancy new hairdo? Did Atticus realize that something was different? So the reason why I wanted to handle this question is, yeah, I think Amber likes it. She was supportive, but not really like driving it, which for me obviously felt good because that meant that she didn't care as much as I did. It was something that I kind of wanted to do, and she supported that decision. But I think looking back on it, she's probably happier that I have hair because she wants me to feel young as well. So I think it's probably mainly that she's happy that I'm happy about it. But did Atticus realize that something was different? Keep in mind, I had the surgery in October. He was 14 months old, and then the whole process has taken about 6 to 8 months to see progress. And because that progress is kind of slow, I think he was exposed to that progress day by day and just kind of adapted to the fact that now I have hair. If the surgery was such that you just like wake up with hair, I think he would have noticed something was up. But because it takes a while, he didn't notice anything. So I've got one more question I'm going to answer from Twitter before I go into some other information. And that question is from @msnyder27. And that question is, do you like to give A and Rosie more or less rise in your shoulders now that they can hold death grips on your hair? And the answer is no. If you're going bald or bald and you're considering any options, invasive or non-invasive, whatever you do, just hold on to your hair and don't let your kids pull it when they're riding your shoulders. So the other question that everyone wants to know is, how much does it cost? And it is a very expensive procedure, which is one of the reasons why it took me so long to pull the trigger on it. I did a lot of research, looked for doctors in different places. I went to a doctor in Colorado, I looked at doctors here, but ultimately here it was about almost twice as much as it was at Dr. Keen's office in Arizona. The procedure there cost me about $11,000. I know, that's expensive, it's very expensive, but here was over $20,000. So that was a huge plus for me, because I knew that as much as I had these hesitations, at least it was going to be almost half the investment as it would have been if I did it here in New York City. And because I had family there, and because I knew someone who actually had their hair done there, I felt a lot better about investing that amount of money. So if you're considering the procedure, obviously that price will change with whatever doctor you do use based on how many grafts you get. If you only need 1,200, if you want to touch up on your hairline, or if you need 4,000, that price is going to differ. And some doctors offer a flat rate fee for each graft, but others have kind of like a graduated scale where as you require more grafts, it becomes cheaper. The process in total doesn't cost cheaper, it's just that the price per graft goes down if you need, say, 3,000 or 4,000. So obviously that's a huge consideration if you're considering the surgery. That is expensive. I mean, $10,000 is a car. So if you're not into doing that, there are definitely other measures that you can take that are non-invasive. And if you want to hold on to the hair that you've got, you should definitely consider those. So my experience with this was pretty awesome. It took a long time to make the decision, but I'm really happy with that decision. I want to be clear too that Dr. Keen didn't solicit me to make this video. I am just super happy with how it turned out, and after getting enough questions, I mean, just a side note, if you're going to do this procedure, people are going to notice. It's impossible to hide, so everyone's going to know. Everyone's been asking. For the last 4 or 5 months, everyone's been asking Amber, everyone's been asking me. I decided I really want to do a video on this and share my experience with people to let them know what the options are. So she didn't ask me to do this video, but I told her that I'd love to share my experience because she was an awesome doctor and she really was very open with me up front and honest with what she was going to do and what my expectations should be. And I really appreciated that. So if you live in Arizona, or even if you don't, I mean, I was in New York and I made the trek to Arizona to have this done. Definitely look into her. I'll put her website below. And if nothing else, just set up a call and have an assessment. I have one brother-in-law who's done it. I have 2 friends who have done it. I have 2 brothers and 2 of their friends who are also getting ready to do it. So definitely look her up, especially since she also offers a $500 travel credit. So I got a $500 discount off of my procedure because I was coming in from out of state, which allowed me to, pay for part of my flights or hotel bills and Ubers and that sort of thing. So that definitely helped. So thanks for watching this video. I really hope it answers some of your questions. It's still a little embarrassing to talk about, but I mean, like I said, it's been kind of hard to hide. I've gone from completely bald to hair in like 8 or 9 months. And so I figured it's probably best just to tell everyone what I did and share that. And hopefully I can help someone out. So if you have any other questions, if I didn't answer all your questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can tweet me at DavidKentClark and use the hashtag WTFDavidHasHair. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe. Thanks again, guys.